Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into a seriously fascinating, deeply complex piece of history and theology. We're unpacking a 1983 speech by Reverend Sun Myung Moon titled Total Indemnity. And we're going to explore a highly structured, almost paradoxical doctrine. It basically claims that the absolute only way to unite a fractured world is by unconditionally loving our ultimate enemies. It's an intense blueprint for global restoration, and it blends extreme personal sacrifice with some incredibly grand geopolitical strategies. So let's get right into the source material and see exactly how this intricate worldview is put together.
This striking quote really captures the core premise of the entire text. It introduces this radical idea that true perfection, and even the ultimate fulfillment of religion itself, requires a massive sacrifice. And it's not just about offering good things to God. The text argues that today, even those who are loved by Satan must be offered on the altar. If God accepts them, well, the role of religion is totally complete, and humanity can finally just live with God exactly as originally intended.
Okay, here's our roadmap for today. 1. Defining total indemnity. 2. Restoring Adam and Eve. 3. Rev Moon's historical path. 4. Loving the ultimate enemy. 5. 4 major providential nations. And 6. Home church and final restoration. Let's jump in.
Section 1. Defining total indemnity, the philosophy of restoration.
Right off the bat, notice the stark contrast being drawn here. On one hand, the text describes the fallen world as completely chaotic. It's driven by individualism with deep disunity between parents, children, and entire generations. But then, in total contrast, the unification church is presented as pushing for absolute worldwide unity. And one of the most prominent ways the text illustrates this is through marriage. It points out that historically, people mostly married within their own race or nation. But it notes that the unification church practices interracial and international marriage without any hesitation whatsoever, all for the specific purpose of becoming one and bringing a highly disunited world back to God.
So the absolutely crucial point here is understanding this very specific definition of indemnity. According to the speech, this is basically an iron rule of the universe. To create a foundation for a heavenly kingdom, you have to go right into a place dominated by Satan. Allow yourself to be persecuted by the exact people Satan loves most and love them in return. The rule is simple, but wow, it's incredibly demanding. If Satan hits you and you don't hit back, you compensate for the blow and you restore what was lost. But if you hit back, you restore nothing. Understanding this absolute non-negotiable rule of non-retaliation is the key to unpacking everything else we're going to talk about today.
And this indemnity doesn't just happen randomly. It operates on a strict, systematic ladder. You simply cannot skip steps. You can't establish a secure foundation for a family without first conquering the individual level. You can't secure the tribe without the family, and so on. Victoriously paying indemnity at each successive level is seen as the only possible way a person can ever truly live comfortably or reach perfection.
Section 2. Restoring Adam and Eve, the foundational family.
The text lays out some incredibly strict requirements for this restoration. It states that a true Adam has to unify 3 very specific loves that were lost during the fall: mother's love, wife's love, and sister's love. Plus, he has to face temptation by seduction, but absolutely overcome it to establish a righteous tradition. Then the text explains that Eve must actually be recreated according to the model of Adam. The speech specifically cites true mother, noting she was married at less than 20 years old and that her first 7 years of marriage required absolute, unwavering obedience to her husband in every single way. According to the doctrine, this strict obedience was the crucial condition that allowed the church to establish foundational holy days, ultimately marking the start of a perfect Adam and Eve.
Section 3. Rev Moon's historical path, from Korea to America.
Let's trace how the church viewed its own historical struggles through this timeline. Starting back in 1968, 120 couples were sent to the front lines in South Korea. They had to endure 3 years of intense persecution, which was seen as paying national-level family indemnity. And because that heavy price was paid, the text claims Reverend Moon was finally able to arrive in America in December of 1971. The speech notes he spent 3.5 years speaking directly to Christianity, and by 1974, he was warmly welcomed in the U.S., receiving around 1,200 awards. The text views this welcome as indemnity for the earlier failure of Christianity in Korea to accept him. This massive momentum led right into huge rallies in 1976 and ultimately to the 1983 call for total mobilization.
During those massive 1976 rallies, Moon famously used this incredibly provocative analogy.
He positioned America as a sick, burning nation that just could not save itself. He firmly asserted that he and the Unification Church were the outside physicians required to step in and literally cure its diseases. Now, the text acknowledges that this super direct approach angered a lot of Americans and sparked a whole period of public attacks and investigations. But it completely frames that pushback as just another necessary phase of the historical harvest.
Which brings us right to the immediate context of the speech. It frames March 1st, 1983 as a critical, all-hands-on-deck emergency period. Moon commands a total mobilization, directly comparing church members to the Jewish people wandering the wilderness. The goal? To endure a rigorous 3-year training period so they can enter a metaphorical land of Canaan and liberate people from communism. The demands placed on the members here are just absolute. We're talking 24-hour dedication, overcoming any and all opposition, being willing to literally die for the cause, and wearing what the text calls the helmet of heavenly heart so they don't end up as spiritual losers.
Section 4. Loving the ultimate enemy. The divine boundary.
The speech introduces this truly fascinating hypothetical dialogue to explain a really deep theological problem. Why can't God just snap his fingers and destroy Satan? Well, according to the text, Satan challenges God's unchanging nature. If God only loved the archangel temporarily, God would essentially be acting like Satan. So to maintain ultimate dignity and prove his unchanging goodness, God is firmly bound to eternally love Satan, no matter how intense the opposition gets. God cannot take revenge. By never, ever fighting back, God essentially has to wait until the fallen archangel is forced to voluntarily surrender and admit that God is indeed God. To back this up, the text points to Jesus as the ultimate historical blueprint. According to this framework, if Jesus had hated his enemies while being crucified, the entire providence of God would have failed right then and there. But because he prayed for his enemies and sacrificed his life without an ounce of hatred, he forced Satan to begin surrendering. The text literally says Satan had to give his signature of surrender. And this exact tradition of unconditional love is the blueprint that church members are commanded to replicate, but on a global scale. Section 5. 4 major providential nations. Geopolitics of restoration. Now we see how this scales up. The speech meticulously assigns very specific cosmic roles and defining characteristics to 4 particular nations. Korea is positioned as the Adam nation, holding the spirit and treasury of thought. Japan is the Eve nation, characterized by beauty. The United States is the Cain nation, representing immense power. And Germany is the Abel nation, representing intellect and technique. Notice how these historical roles dictate the entire geopolitical strategy. The text claims that Reverend Moon is actively gathering these 4 historically antagonistic nations, and that their absolute unity is the literal prerequisite for realizing the kingdom of heaven on earth.
The narrative focuses heavily on the dynamic between Korea and Japan here. It points out that Japan was historically Korea's absolute worst enemy. But Reverend Moon claims he broke Satan's worldwide grip by making the choice to love and forgive the defeated Japanese police right after World War II instead of seeking any kind of revenge. Because of this massive act of forgiveness, the text asserts, the Eve nation of Japan is now willingly shedding blood, sweat, and tears to save the Cain nation of America. Why America, though? Because the text views America not as existing just for itself, but as the powerful channel through which God can reclaim the entire free world. And ultimately, after teaching the traditions of heaven, Eve must return to the Adam nation to finalize the restoration.
Section 6. Home Church and Final Restoration. The Call to Action.
So, what does this mean for the everyday person? The text emphasizes that the grand, global victories won by the church leadership literally mean nothing for the individual unless they establish what's called a home church. This is a specific local area assigned to a member. The text states members have to visit this area daily to restore their Cain-type tribe. The warning here is explicit and incredibly serious. Without a home church foundation, you cannot possess the cosmos, you cannot become one with God, and you simply cannot enter the heavenly kingdom.
The pressure placed on the individual member in this section is just immense. They are strictly commanded to work with an all-out effort, literally at the risk of their own lives. It blends earthly missionary work with high-stakes spiritual consequences. Get this, the text claims that members aren't even in the church because of their own faith. It's actually because thousands of generations of their ancestors sacrificed to push them there. If the member succeeds, they liberate up to 120 generations of ancestors. But if they fail, the text warns they will be blamed, rejected, and left with absolutely no place to go in the spirit world, cast out by those very same angry ancestors.
Ultimately, the absolute end goal of this massive mobilization, this willing acceptance of intense persecution, and all of this geopolitical maneuvering is to completely wipe away historical resentment. The text states that total indemnity aims for complete restoration, leading to a complete perfection that is so total, a brand new heavenly constitution will literally govern the world, a constitution, the speech claims, was already in the process of being drafted.
As we wrap up this explainer, this highly structured, intense doctrine really leaves us pondering a profound psychological and philosophical paradox. The entire framework demands that historical resentments must never, ever be used for revenge, but entirely for the salvation of the enemy. So I want to leave you with this thought to chew on. If the ultimate price for global perfection meant absorbing the blows of your greatest enemy with nothing but unconditional love, could humanity ever truly pay it? Thanks so much for exploring this with us, and we'll see you on the next explainer.